Not going to try and spin this one, guys. It stings.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time. Once again, for Locked On Ducks, I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. This episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins, just like that. So, the Chiefs trailed the Eagles at one point 34-0, which means one day Oregon will win back-to-back national championships. I'm sorry I don't make the rules. Get excited for it. But I'm not excited about Junior Adams leaving the Ducks. Pretty bummed about that, as a matter of fact. What's planned for Na'eem Offord and basketball's free fall continues. I have not seen anything like this in recent college basketball memory. But the big news of the day, Junior Adams is no longer Oregon's wide receiver coach. And I think of this like walking around in the dark after waking up at an hour you don't really know. You could be waking up into something great. Maybe your friends or family have blindfolded you and you're about to be thrusted into a surprise party with all your favorite people and your favorite food, and it's all going to be great. Or maybe the lights don't work in your house and you have a problem and you have to navigate your way down the stairs and you don't know what's going on. You just don't know. That's Junior Adams leaving the Ducks. There could be an option that Oregon goes and finds to replace Junior Adams, and he ends up being great. It could work out incredibly well, and the recruiting that Junior Adams has done in the last couple of years could just be a plug and play with the next guy, and it could be sunshine and rainbows and all wonderful. Or the lights might not be working in the house. We'll see. I don't know which way it's going to go, but the uncertainty is why I don't like this. So he's going to be the wide receivers coach for the Dallas Cowboys, which is not something that I saw coming, which is not something anybody I know saw coming. This just was straight out of the blue, out of the cornfield at Field of Dreams from Kevin Costner. This was not something that I even thought of. And this is the second assistant coach that the Cowboys came and tried to get. An offer was made reportedly to Rashad Samples, the running backs coach, and he turned him down. But while they were poking around in Eugene, they saw what Junior Adams has been doing and went, oh yeah, we like that guy. And look, he's been a high-profile receiver coach for the last several years. He coached Cooper Kupp. He was at Washington, recruited and coached guys like Roma Dunze, Puka Nacua, Jalen McMillan. The track record here is undeniably strong. Oregon had not seen a 1,000-yard receiver in 5 years going into the 2023 campaign, and there were two of them in that same year. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. The track record was really good. The recruiting from this position group has been really, really good. So, yeah, this one does not feel great. This is a guy who brought in two of the three highest-rated wide receiver recruits in the history of Oregon football. DeCorian Moore is the second highest-rated player ever in the history of Oregon football. And Jurion Dickey, the third highest-ranked receiver ever behind Cameron Colvin, class of, I believe, it was 2006. Jurion Dickey's the 15th highest rated player. We haven't even seen what he's going to be able to do in his career yet because of injuries and being a bit further down the depth chart. So we'll see if he ends up having a role this year. But yeah, I just was not expecting this to be my lead segment today. And a guy with a proven track record of recruiting, development, and production. Those are the three areas that you can assess a position coach on. What's the caliber of guys that you bring into that position group? What sort of development do you see from the time they arrive on campus to the time they leave Oregon's campus, whether that's via portal, NFL draft, or graduation? And then what's the production from that room? Do you feel like the talent at that position group is being maximized? And in the last 2 years, I think Oregon has compiled their best 2-year run of wide receiving cores ever. There have been some absolute dogs to come through Oregon's wide receiver room. Guys like Jeff Mail or Braylon Addison, who was probably a higher rated recruit than you remember, or go all the way back with Sammy Parker. Like, there have been a lot of good wide receivers, but these last two rooms have been incredibly deep, incredibly talented, and incredibly productive. And it has been a mix of guys that have been brought in via the portal, like Tez Johnson or Trayshawn Holden or Evan Stewart, and guys who have been recruited and developed at Oregon, like Troy Franklin or Justice Lowe. And I am bummed that I'm wishing Junior Adams all the best in his future career endeavors. I don't know why he'd want to make the jump to the NFL. A lot of times you see what was extra surprising about this. There's a silver lining to it, though. That Adams went to the NFL. Typically, guys that make that jump aren't wild about recruiting because they just want to coach ball. They don't want to do off the field stuff, which I understand, right? Chip Kelly is that kind of guy. He went head coach to OC as over for Ohio State to now going to the Raiders. Why? He just wants to coach ball. So I get that. I really do. But a guy who is recruited not just well at this position group, but better than any wide receiver coach ever in the history of the program, suddenly decides he wants to go take a job where he's coaching the same position group, but in the NFL, and who knows, maybe they're about to trade for Cooper Kupp. I don't know. It's just strange. It is strange, and if you're confused by it, I am too. I had the same reaction, like, wait, he's just gone? He's just done? I have sung his praises all offseason on the show because of how this position group has evolved for Oregon over the last several years. So definitely a bummer. Here's the silver lining, though, of him going to the NFL. The likelihood that he would take any players with him from Oregon's roster, well, it's pretty close to zero, if not zero. Now, maybe a guy who really wanted to play for Coach Adams and not so much Oregon and the rest of the staff, maybe somebody from that wide receiver room decides, nah, this isn't where I want to be anymore. But there is no immediate connection of, hey, this position group coach just went over here and now he's going to take this guy and that guy with him. There can't be any concern of that whatsoever, since you can't, have guys hit the portal and then go to the NFL draft. So that's the good news at the very least. I don't suspect this causes a massive shakeup in the receiver room, but it definitely leaves a void. And who's going to fill that void? Well, question came in from a Locked On Ducks insider who gets priority mailbag access, link in the description below. Mailbag: who should Lanning target as a replacement for Adams? Should he promote from within or outside? Any sleeper candidates that could pop up unexpectedly? I haven't seen any lists pop out. There wasn't an immediate name that came to mind. I mean, my dream target, this is not, I'm going to make this incredibly clear. My dream target would be Brian Hartline at Ohio State. They take our running backs coach and former head coach, and we get their wide receivers coach, who is probably the best individual recruiter of wide receivers in the country. There's no way that Brian Hartline would leave Ohio State. But I imagine we'll start to see names get circulated in the coming days. I do have faith in Dan Lanning here. This isn't the first time he's lost a stellar position coach. You think back to Adrian Clem. How's Alik Terry doing? Awesome. You think back to losing Carlos Lachlan. How do we all feel about Rashad Samples? Grateful that he's staying. Was likely a part of landing DeCorian Moore at the wide receiver spot, or what was a part of landing Oregon's highest rated receiver recruit ever. So I think that Lanning deserves the benefit of the doubt in being able to find a quality replacement. It's not the first time he's lost coaches. He's gone out, and I think he's made good hires across the board. But I don't really have a list in mind of, top wide receiver coaches that I'd say are, the best fit here and there. I think this is just about who fits with the staff and who can bring, everything that Junior Adams brought to the table, which was a lot. I thought he really knocked it out of the park in all three areas. Recruiting, better than ever. Production, better than ever. Development, very clear. Tez Johnson became a better wide receiver when he went to Oregon. Troy Franklin took a huge step forward. I think everything about the position group that he had orchestrated over the last couple of years was really, really good. And now Lanning goes back into, who are we going to hire? What's the best option that this staff can go out and find? Time will tell. But, promoting from within versus hiring outside, I've seen both work at any head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, position coach. I've seen them both work. The question you got to ask yourself is, do you think the head coach is the right guy to make this sort of hire? I think Lanning is. So, yeah, that's a strange way to start the week of shows. But that's why the offseason content continues. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below or hit me up on Twitter. Speaking of five-star true freshmen, is there a change in plan for Na'eem Offord? Tosh Lupoi saying one thing, the report was another, that, and one other question about the playoff. Coming up next. First, let's talk about FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Plus, college football action readily available. They've got win totals. Oregon's is 10.5 for the second straight year, tied for the highest in the entire country. They have got conference championship odds. Oregon's top 5. Top 2, national championship odds. Oregon is top 5. Everything you want's over there at FanDuel. And right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. So there was an outside report that Na'eem Offord was going to play safety or nickel for the Ducks, and then Oregon defense coordinator Tosh Lupoi was asked about it and said, no, we recruited him to play corner. We see him as a corner or a nickel. Well, here's just adding to the list of things I'm interested to see in spring football, because Offord, like DeCorian Moore, is the highest rated recruit ever at his position to the University of Oregon. Now, that's just something that is on paper. That doesn't automatically mean he's ready to go right away. That's what the scouting community will tell you. That's what you're going to see if you talk to anyone who has ever watched the kid play live, because he's an incredibly talented player. But does it guarantee anything? No, because if he's not making the shift to safety, two takeaways there. The first one is Offord's path to playing time, I think, is slightly more narrow. Right now, I'd say Oregon's starting cornerbacks are most likely Jalil Florence and Theron Johnson. Florence, who missed this past season with an injury. You never know how guys come back from that. And Theron Johnson, the transfer from Northwestern, who I think is this year's Brandon Johnson. Comes in and is a starting caliber player. And, Johnson started the season hot, cooled off a bit as it went on, but overall was a good player in Oregon secondary this past year. Did a lot of really good things. And they're both around 5'11" and have got experience, and they weren't first or second team all conference guys, but they were honorable mention guys at non-traditional football powers that are academic powers in the country. Johnson from Northwestern, Theron Johnson from Northwestern, Brandon Johnson from Duke, and they have the same last name. So a lot of similarities there. Maybe I'm overselling that, but Johnson, I think, is one of Oregon's starting corners in all likelihood. So is Offord going to beat out Jalil Florence? Maybe. Coming off an injury. He's not the only guy in that room, by the way. Or does he go and start at nickel? Maybe. That'd be a departure, because Offord is 6'1". Johnson is in the 5'10", 5'11" range. To have someone be a little bit taller that plays that nickel spot, that'd be a slight change in physical profile that I know a lot of Oregon fans want to see going into next year. Even though Ohio State isn't on the roster, it's still something that a lot of fans feel held Oregon back. And in some respect, sure. I think overall you just needed better players. Dylan Thieneman's not that much taller than or that much bigger than Kobe Savage and Tysheem Johnson, but he's got more athletic bursts, and he's just a better, more instinctual football player than either of those guys. So Offord's path to playing, if he's not moving back to the safety position, is slightly more narrow. I mean, Tosh Lupoi did mention his positional versatility, so it's not like he could never make that particular switch. This reminds me a lot of Triquez Bridges, where he was recruited as a safety, and we never got to see him play that spot, and he went to corner, and he was a fine player for a couple of years, but it always kind of left those of us on the outside looking in, wondering what he would have been like at safety on the back end. I mean, there was a moment in time where you could have had Brian Addison and Triquez Bridges as your two starting safeties at 6'5" and 6'3". Not a lot of athletes that look that way. So I think the options at the second starting safety spot across from Thieneman are pretty wide. Like there's a wide array of guys that can go out and claim that job. That could be Aaron Flowers. That could be Kingston Lopa. That could be Peyton Woodyard. That could be Trey McNutt, another incoming 5-star true freshman who is one of the 20 or 25 highest rated recruits in Oregon history. I'm pretty sure he and Offord are both top 20, and DeCorian Moore is top 2, which is pretty darn good. So I look at what Offord brings to the table, and it'll just come down at the end of the day to how he performs in spring football and how quickly he adapts to everything. Do you understand your coverage assignments at all times so that you don't have a coverage bust on the back end? Because if you've got communication problems on the defensive line, that might lead to a hole being opened up and a run play, breaking for an extra 10 to 15 yards perhaps, or a quarterback having time to throw when he should, or what have you, right? Not saying you are okay with those sorts of mistakes, but a mistake on the back end, we saw that in the Rose Bowl. Miscue, Jeremiah Smith is running wide open, easy pitch and catch, 50-yard touchdown. Like, those are the sorts of things that I think will determine whether Offord carves himself out to be a starter or just a role player coming into 2025. But, Tosh was very clear that, we recruited him to play corner. Well, does he go and start at corner as a true freshman? Maybe he does. Maybe he goes and starts at outside corner. Maybe it's him and Jalil Florence, or Jalil slides inside to nickel. I don't know. I think there are a lot of options, and the secondary is one of the position groups I'm most interested to see going into this year. Nathan sent this question in a while ago about the 12-team playoff and any kind of format change that could or should arrive. He says, what about a 12-team playoff with double elimination bracket for the top 8 seed? Nope, not going to happen. So just rule that part out of it. Combined with closer spacing of rounds, entire playoff could be done in the same time frame. Rivalry week, November 25th. Conference champions, first weekend in December. Army-Navy game. Everyone gets a week off except Army-Navy, December 9th, round 1, and then it just keeps going down the list, and everything wraps up by January 18th. So obviously with, the way the playoff worked out for Oregon, it was not an ideal situation. I said going into the Big Ten title game, yes, Oregon should want to win the game. And coming out of the season now, I have very much changed my mind. Should have lost the game. Would have wound up in the semifinals. Maybe they lose to Ohio State eventually, but I feel pretty good about Oregon winning games at home since the national champions came to Autzen and were not able to win. And then who would they have played the next week? I think it would have been Georgia, perhaps, with a backup quarterback, and Georgia, still a capable team with a really good roster, but I watched them play against Notre Dame, and I watched Notre Dame play against Penn State. There's a lot of transitive hypotheticals in there. But the problem with the playoff this past year is that it's not going to get fixed going into next season. Now, for 2026, we could see a format shift so that you don't have a situation like what happened to Oregon where they're playing the eventual national champion for their first game. And the biggest thing that I would like to see shifted, and again, Nathan, double elimination, no, that doesn't work logistically. That's not the way that it should go. And that reduces the importance of playoff games. No, that's not what I would like to see happen. I would either like to see not giving automatic buys to the conference champions, or more realistically, just reseed after the first round. And the highest seed gets to play the lowest remaining seed. And the next highest seed plays the next lowest remaining seed, et cetera, et cetera. That's the way I think within the current framework where you still emphasize conference championship games, which is what the leagues really, really want because it makes them more valuable and more money and all that stuff. That's fine. I understand where their heads are at there. I like conference championship weekend a lot. So maximizing its importance, sure, go for it. But what you should have instead of buys being given to those teams who then go play a neutral site, buys given to those teams who then play at home. That's what I would like to see, because that then keeps maximum importance on the regular season, because there should be nothing as valuable in a playoff structure as a home playoff game. And I don't think those changes, according to Heather Dinich of ESPN, last I'd heard on it, are not expected to arrive next year, which could work out for the Ducks. Because if you're an everyday out there, I don't think Oregon will be at the same level next season. Their schedule is incredibly favorable. I expect them to make the playoff, but this is something I'll talk about probably later this week. Big Ten championship game, I don't know. That's a challenging proposition, but the schedule works out in an incredibly favorable way. But if they don't get there, let's say they go 11-1, lose to Penn State, and Penn State goes 11-1, loses to Ohio State, but Michigan's got a bunch of losses. It works out to be Ohio State, Penn State in the Big Ten championship game. Oregon probably gets a home playoff game at that point. So is that the worst thing in the world? Not necessarily. And maybe they'd benefit from a format that I agree is screwed up and wrong. But if it's going to be there, well, you play the hand you're dealt, and you can't go back and redeal because you're the card player and not the dealer in this hypothetical. So, no, I just like to see the teams that earn a bye in the regular season with a conference championship or being one of the highest ranked teams in the college football playoff get a home playoff game, because that's the real ultimate prize. So, does it drag on too long into January? Probably a touch. Yeah, a touch. But is that going to get resolved? I'm never hopeful anything's going to get resolved in the sport, as it should. But lo and behold, I follow along and talk about it every day, all year round. Anyway, so the free fall of Oregon basketball almost came to an end. But now you've got a must-win game on Tuesday. They were so close. Oregon was so close to just riding their season in one game. In one game, it could have been easy to just forget everything that had happened in the 4 games prior if you had gone to number 9 Michigan State and played a full 40 minutes of basketball. But they didn't. Couple of problems here as the spiral continues. I have not seen anything like this in college basketball that I can remember in the last couple of years, certainly not with Oregon, because generally when Oregon hits this lull in the season and starts playing poorly over a prolonged stretch and losing games that they shouldn't, or losing games they could win in frustrating fashion, normally their resume is so weak, they're playing themselves off the bubble. What Oregon has done in the last couple of weeks with a 5-game losing streak and 6 of 7 defeats is they have played themselves out of a potential top 3 seed. Now, Joe Lunardi's next bracketology comes out on Tuesday, which is when Oregon hosts Northwestern. Late game, by the way, and I'll get to that game in a sec, but man, Oregon has to have it. On3's bracket projection has Oregon down to a 9 seed after losing to Michigan State. I bet Lunardi has them at an 8, or maybe even holds them steady at a 7. But it has been a rapid fall from grace to go from a projected 3 seed when they were 16-3, and you don't have to win every game to hold that mark. Over the last 5 games, Oregon lost at Minnesota, unranked, at UCLA, also unranked, but playing better basketball, at Michigan, at home against Nebraska, then at Michigan and at Michigan State, who were at number 24 and number 9 respectively when Oregon played them. To remain in the projected top 4 seeds in the tournament, Oregon probably has to win at least 2, maybe 3 of those games. I suspect if they had beaten either Minnesota or UCLA and Nebraska at home and one of the Michigan teams, then they're still probably a projected top 4 seed. Maybe they fall down to 4, but if you'd picked up another quality win. But they didn't. They didn't. Oregon went out and played its best half of basketball of the year. Hostile environment, really good team. Yes, as I talked about on Friday's show with Matt Sheehan of Locked On Spartans, Michigan State was reeling a bit. They had lost 2 straight, but they had not lost on their home floor all year, and Oregon went gangbusters in the first half. They hit 10 threes, including a Bartholomew triple at the buzzer to stretch their lead to 14. They led 50-36 at the break. They lost by 12. Like, man. As great as the first half was, the second half was equally as bad. Two things that went wrong for the Ducks here. Number one, bad shot selection or a lack of shot selection. So Oregon in the first half, that has not been a great three-point shooting team this year, hit 10 threes. Shellstad was hot. He had 18 in the first half. Evans hit a three. Biddle was hitting three. They were falling. That's great. They shot the ball in the second half like they wanted to make 20 threes in the game. That's not realistic. If you hit 13 threes in a game, on average, you would be one of the best three-point shooting teams in the country. That's not how three-point shooting goes. So if you make 13 triples in a game, I don't have a stat off the top of my head. I bet you your team's win percentage is somewhere around 80 to 90%. You are incredibly tough to beat if you make 13 triples. But what Oregon ran into is they got 3-point happy, and they have no inability right now to consistently score inside. And that is a three-pronged problem. When Shellstad gets downhill, he's not super big, but he's not putting up floaters the way he used to. He had a drive to the basket in the second half where he could have easily put the ball up off the glass and at least given the bigs a chance for an offensive rebound. But frankly, I've seen him finish far more difficult shots. Instead, he passed it to the corner and got a shot clock violation. TJ Bamba, who I thought was much better with his shot selection in this game, not forcing threes and trying to get inside, he can be an excellent finisher. When he doesn't have an open lane, he doesn't know how to throw up a jump hook. So he drives to get 5 feet from the basket. He's chiseled at 6'5", and he passes the ball out. And then the other problem is Nate Biddle, who, well, and Brandon Angel has some culpability here as well, because Angel is just too soft. He's getting pushed around game in and game out. And Dana Altman's got this tough line to walk of, do I put in KJ Evans, who played great in this game, by the way? Do I put in KJ Evans, who's a better defender and a better rebounder, but relies on others to get offensive points and is not as great of a shooter? Or do I put in Angel, who's an incredibly skilled offensive player, but gives you nothing in terms of defense and rebounding? That's what the line he's having to walk right now with those guys. But Biddle has just completely lost the thread on how to score inside. The few jump hooks he does put up are not going down. And then they just don't have an ability. Biddle is not as big and strong as N'Faly Dante, and it shows up. So that's one problem, is on a day where the three-point shots were going down, Oregon didn't want to be balanced. They just kept putting up the threes, and a lot of them were not close. Shellstad had an air ball. Tracy had some ugly bricks. They were just bad. They were just bad. So that's the first problem. The second problem is this team is too often lost and lacking intensity on the defensive end of the floor. It's way too easy for other teams to score inside. And Michigan State at will just got downhill with their bigs, with their guards, with Jason Richardson's son, whoever. They were scoring inside. And it's not just that Biddle was not blocking shots as he usually does. It's that guys were just getting beat and getting pushed around way too often. Way too often. The defensive effort of this team in the last 5 games, all losses, has been so un-Dana Altman-like. And that's where it has to start. Because in the last 2 games, both against Michigan, when they put up 76, and in this game where they were over 70 as well, those are good offensive games. It used to be that 70-plus points was an automatic win, because Dana's not giving up more than 65. But in the last 5 games, Oregon has allowed at least 77 points in every game. That's unacceptable. And this is This is a complete collapse at the moment. And Dana's got to find a way to right the ship, or he's going to play himself out of the NCAA tournament after a 16-3 start with wins over Texas A&M and Alabama. And I knew Oregon wasn't going to, well, I mean, I know what the potential of this team is. The potential is go into East Lansing, put up 50 points in the first half. They did it with defense, which turns into offense and easy buckets. That's the only way they really score in the paint. The potential of this team is still there, but man, their floor is low. So now Tuesday, 8 p.m. local time tip, which is super late, against Northwestern, and then Rutgers at home on Sunday. No other way to slice it. If Oregon wants to be an at-large team, they have to win both of those games. Because if they can't win both of those games at home, then guess what? I don't know how many games they're going to win. And those early season wins are holding them squarely into the field of 68 right now. They won't do that forever if they keep stacking up the bad losses. All in all, losing at Michigan State and at Michigan, not the end of the world when you play well in both. The problem, though, is they should have won at Michigan State. They could have won at Michigan. Either win could have stabilized things for the time being. And then you stack up the bad losses. UCLA getting blown out. Nebraska at home is a 7.5-point favorite. Minnesota, not a great team. Improved, but not that good. I don't expect, and nor should you, complete perfection in these situations. Nobody is. Auburn just got trounced on their home floor. They're the best team in college basketball, okay? These things are going to happen. Great teams put up, top 5, 6 seeds in the NCAA tournament with anywhere from 6 to 8 losses. That's normal. What's not normal is stacking up the bad losses. You can have 1 or 2. You can't have 3 to 5. And that's where this team is at right now. They're in danger of allowing these things to cycle or spiral, snowball. Just keep gathering negative momentum. So, I mean, it's bad. There's no other way to put it. It's bad, and it has to start with defense. Yeah, you'd like him to shoot the ball better, but it doesn't matter. 10 threes, 50 points in a half, 74 points on the road, boom, you lose by 12. How? You can't get stops. It's got to start there. And at some point, this team needs to say enough is enough, and they just don't. They're passive with shot. Bamba and Shellstad not putting up shots when they should. It's a frustrating team to watch because they're not battling injuries like they were in the previous years. That's not the problem here. It's not, well, wait till this guy gets back. No, all the pieces are there. They just have to play better. Tuesday night, Northwestern. I hope on Wednesday's show, my third segment of the pod is talking about a win that stopped an L5. If not, full on, I might melt down here on the show. I might start pulling my hair out, and I don't even know what's going to. Oregon has to win that game. You got to win both games this week. These teams are not that good. But Oregon can beat anybody. Oregon can lose to anybody. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.